You're listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast, a podcast for Steelers fans by Steelers fans. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, read articles on renegadeblitz.com, and like us on Facebook. And it's officially draft week. Welcome, everybody, to the Renegade Blitz podcast. I'm Ty Polk, joined by Chris Ward, back with you to talk about a very exciting draft this year. Chris, how excited are you for it? We got a couple future Steelers coming in this week.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's finally here. You wait all off season, really, like the day after the Steelers season ends, back in January, like people are already talking about the draft. And I'm ready just to see which players are coming to Pittsburgh because at this point, I'm kind of burned out with all the speculation of like who's coming. And, you think it's going to be one of the three big running backs they're going to pick. But we'll have to see that this week. But it should be interesting.
Yeah, man, finally, all the speculation, the 1,000,001 mock drafts that everyone puts up, that from everything, the anonymous scouts and GMs that talk dirt on some of these draft picks, I think personally, to try to see if they could steal them in the later rounds and stuff like that. But it's almost over, and we always see the turn back the clock to Tuesdays, way back Wednesdays, whatever it is, about on this days, with whoever got drafted. And it's so important to see those things because it really makes you think about the lucky history that we as Steelers fans have had with so many hits in the draft and very few misses.
Yeah, I mean, you looked just yesterday, Roethlisberger, the 17th year anniversary of him getting drafted. Steelers got lucky in that draft for him to fall to number 11. You think about the Browns took Kellen Winslow, 6 overall, the tight end out of Miami, and they could have used Roethlisberger. He was right from Findlay, Ohio. Not too far from Cleveland, and the Steelers, they ended up getting Ben at number 11. And that was just a great quarterback draft, arguably the greatest all time. You think about the 1983 quarterback draft class also with John Elway, Dan Marino, and Jim Kelly. So 3 Hall of Famers there. And I think Rivers and Phillip Rivers and Eli Manning, of course, Eli won 2 Super Bowls. So I think they'll get in the Hall of Fame also with Ben.
Yeah, it's kind of insane. Really, that draft, when you think about it, kind of shaped the league as we know it. The only person still from that 2004 draft is Larry Fitzgerald of the Cardinals. But even with that, they're still waiting to see what his future is, if he decides to retire or if he gives it one go either in Arizona or somewhere else. And Fitzgerald is one of the first jerseys that I ever had. He went to Pitt, and we're going to be talking to a Pitt current Pitt student in a couple minutes, and this is going to be very exciting. And it's always fun to reminisce over draft picks of Steelers past. Chris, who was your favorite draft pick in your time as a Steelers man?
Probably Roethlisberger, but I wasn't I was kind of young. I was like 10, so I wasn't really. I was 9, but around that age. But I wasn't really watching the draft, fully invested and knowledgeable of what was going on. But as far as when I really started following it, man, that's a tough question. I don't really. I remember vividly. I was really hyped about the Rashard Mendenhall pick and Limas Sweed, and back in 2008. I think that was the first draft I really followed, and I was really hyped out about that. But man, that's a tough question. I'm trying to think.
Well, let's rephrase that question. Who was a draft pick that you had a ton of hype about, and it wound up disappointing you in the end?
Probably the Rashard Mendenhall. I was in 8th grade at the time, and I was about to go be a freshman in high school, and I was really I thought that was going to be, and Limas Sweed too. I was really high on him, so I guess those 2 guys come. As far as excitement, probably those 2 guys.
Yeah, man. Mendenhall was one of my favorites because I played concert band and Mendenhall played the saxophone and I played the clarinet. So I kind of had an affinity to him as well. Limas Sweed was another one. Really, you remember those soul-crushing drops in his rookie season, of course, that AFC Championship game, but you also have to think about That big block he had against Baltimore in the AFC Championship game, that was kind of Lyman Swede's swan song as a player.
Shamarko Thomas, like, he wasn't a first-round pick, but I remember I was pretty high on him. I thought he was going to be really good.
So we've been talking about Steelers draft failures. Me personally, Jarvis Jones is one. That's a recent one. But it's time for us to talk about the future with the Steelers and what we'll see from the Steelers draft room this week. We would like to welcome back Nick Farabaugh, Steelers and Pitt football writer for Pittsburgh Sports Now. Nick, thanks for taking a little bit of time out of your day again to talk with us about this, well, interesting NFL draft this year for the Steelers.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure as always to be on here. It was fun last time, and I think we certainly have a lot of developments that have kind of happened over this course. Obviously, the discourse since whatever happened at home in Cleveland has been pretty exhausting. I'm ready for the draft to be here already.
Real quick, we were talking about this earlier. We want to know what was your biggest Steelers draft disappointment? Let's get it off on like a thinking mode right now.
Senquez Golson's definitely up there. And I mean, he was just a bust because he never even played. I mean, he didn't even play a preseason game. That's how injured this dude was. And I thought he really had some potential there. That's a what if, I guess, if you would. He's a big one. I mean, you look back down the list. I think Lyman Swede was definitely came in with a lot of hype. Kind of the notorious guys. Jarvis Jones is another one that I think a lot of people had high hopes for, and he just never put it together. Steelers draft bus. Shamarko Thomas is another one. I think when I was coming in, you guys are talking about him. And Shamarko is a guy that was supposed to succeed Troy. So you put he was like a 4th round pick, right? So like you put that's unnecessarily high expectations to put on him. But man, some of the painful draft misses over the years were certainly those guys. And I mean, you want to talk about offensive guys also like Dree Archer. Thought he was going to be like a really explosive, different type of weapon the Steelers really haven't had. And he never turned into anything. That was another pretty sad miss.
Yeah, Artie Burns is another one. We could go all day really about that one as well. But
with the Burns, I had a little bit of a feeling that Burns. I was a little skeptical at the time because it seemed like it was a little bit of a reach at the time. I remember. I know they wanted William Jackson III, and they wanted a quarterback really bad. I thought they reached there for Artie Burns, but definitely a draft. But Kevin Colbert hasn't had many during his tenure. I think only really Jarvis Jones and Artie Burns really were like pure draft busts. Because Mendenhall had some good years, and same thing with like Ziggy Hood. Like they were decent, but not completely draft bust.
Yeah, that's the thing about it. I think Artie Burns. The reason I wouldn't list Artie Burns, you kind of felt like from just like watching what he did in Miami to like the talk, like even around just like major media. Usually, you see someone, try to spin like really surprising pick and say, "Well, this is why this happened." I never really felt that happen for Artie Burns. Like everyone was just like, what in the world did they just do? So like the expectations, he was like a 1st round pick, but those expectations, I never really had high expectations for Artie Burns. I never did.
Well, let's get started with the future. And Tony Pauline of Pro Football Network said that the Steelers have narrowed their draft selection to 3 choices. Najee Harris, the running back out of Alabama, Landon Dickerson, his offensive line center in Alabama, and Tevin Jenkins out of Oklahoma State. Who would you want the team to take and why?
Out of those 3, I think I would personally lean towards Jenkins. Now, this is because I prefer O-line over running back. I've discussed this many times. I think that running backs, it's not even that you get more out of linemen. Like, yes, they can be 10-year guys. They can be decade-long. It's just running backs are more fungible. And I think from a play-to-play basis in the NFL, the running back position is dictated more by other positions than probably any other position in football. So it's like, how much can Najee help? Now, can he help a lot? Yes. It's not like if Najee comes in round 1 But let's say they don't get a good tackle, and Banner or Core 4, one of them is just bad, really bad. That hole's going to be there all year. You can't run to one side of the line, and it's like how much improvement are we going to get from that 30-second rushing attack? Now, Najee probably immediately jumps that a little bit, and in terms of short-term gains, like 2-3 year gains. I think Najee brings up really good gains. I think he's going to be a very good back. But Jenkins is a guy where you look at what he can do. Top 5 tackle in the class, can be a plug and play at right tackle. I think he would beat out one of Banner or Core 4 and start this year. I think he's good enough to do that. And then, let him fail at tackle. There's kind of rumors that he could switch to guard. And if he does, he could be the successor to David DeCastro. If, he's a solid tackle, but maybe he's a better guard. That's possible as well. I think he gives you just more bang for your buck, both in the short term, because again, I think this is a short-term help and a long-term help. But second on that list, I would probably go Najee and Dickerson. I love Dickerson. His tape's amazing. Like top 15 player on tape, but I can't do it with the injuries. I can't. It's too risky for me.
And when I talk about with Jenkins, the interesting thing about that, he would be only the 7th offensive tackle taken in the first round in the Steelers' entire history. Jermaine Stevens was the last first-round offensive tackle in 1996, and all the previous 6 spent no more than 6 seasons in Pittsburgh. And by the way, the one tackle to spend 6 seasons in Pittsburgh, you have to go all the way back to 1955.
Whew, man, that is so the Steelers can't draft first-round tackles. Okay, learning. That's yikes. And then you kind of look at, hey, they had better history of getting running backs that early. Franco Harris, right? I mean, they don't have a Franco. They don't even. Jeez, I didn't know that, man. And Jenkins, I think Jenkins would break that streak, and he would get a second contract and stay for the team with like 8 to 9 years at least. And the Steelers are lucky because usually tackle classes aren't very deep, and they're lucky this year that it is deep because they have the flexibility to play kind of what they want to do at 24, which is tackle, whatever, linebacker, corner, running back, right? So the history of that, and yeah, you're completely right. Kevin Colbert's never drafted one in the first round. Like, I think that's the only position he is not drafted outside of all these specialists in the first round. So Colbert doesn't invest high capital in tackles either. Highest tackle I think he ever drafted was Mike Adams, and that didn't really work out either for the Steelers when they drafted him. So, and you kind of look at the tackles he's had over his career. Now, Marcus Gilbert was one of those high draft investments that did work. But then you had like Filer, Villanueva. There were some guys way back when, like Marvell Smith, Max Starks. Some of the guys that really didn't have a ton of draft capital behind him.
Yeah, I think, Tevin Jenkins, if he's the guy at 24, I think that would be a perfect fit because they say he's a dominating running blocker. They say he plays with a mean streak. And I think he would mesh perfectly with Adrian Clem just from listening to his interviews, like the most recent one on Steelers.com. He talked about how he wants the Steelers offensive line to get back to being more physical. And I think Jenkins would be the perfect fit right there.
Yeah, that's the thing about Jenkins. Probably the meanest, nastiest lineman in the class, like anywhere on this board. You look at center, guard, tackle. I think Jenkins is probably the nastiest of those guys. And all you have to do is look at his pro day presser, and he literally said that. He would bring that to the table, and he's also has good footwork, so he's a very steady pass protector. So he's not just the guy that's planting dudes in the ground and is getting beat around the arc in pass pro. So this is a guy that has Pro Bowl potential, in my opinion. I would like Jenkins a lot for the Steelers at 24. But again, I kind of get the feeling, the more I'm hearing, that I don't think Jenkins makes it to 24.
Oh, really? You think he'll get drafted by the Colts maybe or something like that?
Titans, I think, are a good possibility. I think maybe the Bears, the Washington football team could go as early as 17 to the Raiders. There's been buzz as high as 13 to the Chargers. Tevin Jenkins, I don't think makes the 24, but I would love it if he did and they took him. But obviously that would be the thing about the report that shocked kind of everyone about the Jenkins being listed there is that there was no Tomlin and Colbert in Stillwater for that pro day. So that would be trend breaking, obviously.
And then with Dickerson, man, he's like the biggest boom or bust type of player like I could think. I mean, it's just like he's a good player, but those injuries, the medical just, he's coming off an ACL injury and he's had 2 of them, I believe, and then 2 ankle injuries. I mean, that's a lot for a guy that's just coming into the league, and he's a big guy too. And like when you have those lower body injuries, it's just like really risky, and that's why I'm concerned. Like I don't know where he's going to end up in this draft. It's going to be really interesting.
I'm kind of with you. I don't know where he's going to land. Like he could land as early as he could be off the board by the time the Steelers pick. He could go shortly after the Steelers pick. Like he could probably go at 27 or 31 to the Ravens. Like he could be a Raven, and that would suck because he's really good. But like he could also fall. I think Pauline said later he could fall for some teams won't touch him until the 5th round.
Yeah.
Like
So
like I don't know, but if he's there at 55, they should take. Like there's no question.
Yeah, I just don't like. I mean, with if he gets one more ACL, like what does that mean? I'm not too sure. Like I'm not sure if even it was on the same leg or not or what have you. But
they were separate legs.
They're separate legs.
He even had separate ankle injuries, I believe, as well.
Oh, okay. So I mean, if he would get another one to like the right one or whatever, that's 2 on one leg. I'm not a doctor or anything like that. I just don't know if what would that mean career wise for a guy? It's just really risky for teams to take a shot on him. Maybe if like a team has a lot of draft capital, maybe they'll take the risk with it, but I don't know.
Well, let's talk about the other centers in the draft, because it's not just Dickerson they could also pick up. There's Quinn Miners, who's really gone up the board as kind of the draft darling out of D3 power Wisconsin Whitewater, and also Creed Humphrey out of Oklahoma. So you kind of grade Dickerson as a 2nd round center. Say if Dickerson, Miners, or Humphrey were available, would you take either of those 2 over Dickerson?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Dickerson is a great talent, and I would have a tough time passing on Creed Humphrey for Landon Dickerson at 55. And I would give serious thought to Quinn Miners as well. Now, Humphrey is a guy that is etching, just from his tape, is etching along that round 1 border. He's kind of close, but he's not quite there, right? Like, when you look at what he does, he's very steady. He's a good athlete. He's high football IQ. He gets beat at the point of attack a little bit too much for my liking, but he is a wrestler, so he has good. You obviously know he has good leverage and stuff like that. He has a really good background. He started at Oklahoma for the past 3 or 4 seasons. He played right out the jump there. And if you know Oklahoma football, you know that the offensive line, very tough to play on there early, especially. So Creed Humphrey's a very exceptional leader. I would take Humphrey over Dickerson if he's there at 55. Now, Miners is interesting because, again, D3 to the NFL, it's a tough projection, but you saw what he did at the Senior Bowl. He was utterly dominant. He really improved there. I thought his hands were better. I thought he was much more steady. I thought he looked more comfortable in his footwork. And you kind of look at what he had, because he didn't play this season, obviously, down at that D3 level. They didn't play. So he's a guy that can really just smack guys out of the picture. Like, he consistently was dominating guys on the D3 level. So when you look at the small school guys, you want to see them obviously be the best player on the field, and they kind of just dominate. And I thought he did that exceptionally well at Wisconsin Whitewater. So I think I would sway Dickerson slightly, because I think Dickerson's talent. Again, if Dickerson was healthy, I would be banging the table for this guy to be 24, to be the pick at 24. And in fact, I think he would be the pick at 24 if he would be there. But then again, if he was healthy, he probably wouldn't be there at 24, right? Like, yeah, he would be too good. So, I would take Dickerson, but Miners not far behind either, and I would take Creed Humphrey as the top center in this class.
And with Miners, what have you been hearing from people? Like how concerned are they? I know you mentioned the Senior Bowl, and a lot of people have said that too, that like he flat out dominated there. But how concerned are people with that? That's a huge jump, obviously, from D3 to playing in the NFL. The competition level just, not even comparable. It's just, a whole different, stratosphere, really.
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of what the Senior Bowl's for guys like Miners. With the D3, you go up against guys like, the top senior edge rushers or the top senior D tackles. And he's up against obviously all Americans at the D1 level. And that's kind of what it is. It's the jumping competition, and he handled it well. I think there are some teams that will hold out because of it, but I think a lot of teams were sold. And I think this is why he went from probably a 5th to 6th round pick to a 3rd round pick, like an early 3rd. And now he's going to slip it probably to the late 2nd because there's just too many teams that need centers there. I mean, you just kind of look at the Rams, the Packers are there. The Chiefs are now right there too, twice. And obviously, I think the earliest he goes is 51, or maybe it's 50. I think it's 50 to the Dolphins. Like that's when he could realistically come off the board. And then the Steelers, I think that's kind of the thing. And I think he's really put himself in good position to answer those level of competition questions because he was so good at the Senior Bowl. And that's kind of what you do. That's your measuring stick for these guys when they go up to the big level, the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Game, whatever it is. Can they stand out? And I think Miners really didn't. So I don't think many teams will have too many concerns about the level of competition just because he answered those. But there are certainly some teams that will still, but I don't think the Steelers will be one of them.
And there was a guard he plays for Tampa Bay, I think, Ali. Okay. Yeah, and he played at Division III school.
Yeah, he played. Yeah. He did play I mean, the Bucks have 2 Division III guys.
Okay, yeah, because I've been hearing that people compared, to like they went on and had it, or he went on and had a successful career. He started in the Super Bowl, so maybe Miners could do something like that too. So like, it's a big jump, but certainly possible that he could make a career out of it and dominate the Senior Bowl. So it should be interesting to see how teams view that.
Let's get back to running back, and that's still a big topic for the Steelers. And of course, we know about their history with mid-round running backs. Aside from Harris, then you have to think about Javonte Williams, but I don't know if he has a first-round grade, but he's certainly going to be someone in the 2nd round. His backfield mate in Carter out of North Carolina, and Trey Sermon and Chuba Hubbard out of Oklahoma State. There's another couple guys I can think of off the top of my head. Is there value in a mid-round running back for the Steelers?
Yes, there are values in that. Now, I think the Steelers have to change the way they evaluate the running back position. I think they have gone for unathletic guys that don't have good all-around athleticism. If you look at even the speed guys they have, Drew Archer, Chris Rainey, let's talk about those guys. You look, they are fast line. They tested well in the straight line, but their agilities, their vertical, it wasn't good. Like they tested bad in those ends. And so you kind of look at that and you're like, why do they essentially draft unathletic players? Like Benny Snell is unathletic. Dwyer wasn't athletic. I mean, even Mendenhall was decently athletic, but like even James Conner didn't test very well, and he worked out. Lev Bell tested pretty well for his size, and he turned out to be pretty athletic laterally and stuff. So they need to look at the position and get all-around athletes. Like they have to change that first of all. That's the thing they need to do because, listen, just because they get, let's say they do get Najee Harris, just because they get Najee Harris doesn't mean they don't need a running back next year. Najee Harris can't do everything. Like what if he gets hurt? What happens then, right? Like, if no one emerges behind Najee Harris, maybe it's Anthony McFarland, who knows? They're going to need a running back again. So like they need to change how they evaluate the running back position. Stop with the unathletic guys, get good all-around athletes. Now there is value in this class, but it's not a good running back class. And this is something that I acknowledge when people argue with me that they should do running back round 1. I think the best argument you can make is that this is not a good running back class. It's not. It's just straight up not. I think Najee's in a tier of his own, and it's not close. Like I don't want to say I don't like ETN. I do. I just don't like him at 24. I don't like Javonte at 24. I think they both have significant questions to their game. I think both don't have great vision, which is just not good. And I think ETN is not a good pass protector. And they don't have a good pass protector on their roster. So, like, I don't get the value of that. Now, there are guys that you can look at. I think Sermon's a really good player for round 3 at 87 because he is that all-around athlete. Maybe he's not fast, but he's explosive. He's quick. He's good in pass pro. he can be your guy. Kenneth Gainwell's another guy I really like. A little bit of a smaller back, but he's physical and he's actually pretty good in pass pro and he's a great receiver. He's a guy that I think there's value. Now, when I talk about mid-round running backs in this class, and there's Khalil Herbert as well, but he doesn't fit anything that the Steelers look at, so I doubt they're even interested. When we talk about mid-round running backs here, if they don't take one in round one, which is mean they pass on Najee, and presumably they would pass on Etienne and Williams because I can't see those guys getting to 55. They would need to draft one in round 2 or 3. There's no doubt about it. It's not a good running back class. I'm not really impressed with many of the late round guys. I like some of the late round guys. It's like committee guys, but if they want their lead back, man, they got to get one in the top 3 rounds. And historically, 35 to around 90 is kind of that sweet spot for running backs. Like we see a lot of guys come off there, like Dalvin Cook, Lev Bell came off in that range. I think Kamara came off in that range. A ton of the running backs did last year, J.K. Dobbins, Jonathan Taylor. So that's historically a really nice sweet spot if they can get a talented running back there. But again, it's not a good class. So they should not wait until round 4. This is a top 3 round need because of the class. So if they don't draft one by the 4th round, and maybe they get a miracle like Sermon falls to round 4 or something. I don't know, but I don't expect it. I don't know what they're going to do at the running back position. They'll probably have a dumpster fire again.
Benny Snell is RB1.
Kalen Ballage is RB1.
Yeah, honestly. I mean, at that point, man, like throw out a flyer on Adrian Peterson or free agency. Throw a flyer at like Todd Gurley. I don't know. Like it's not even a good running back free agency class right now. So yeah, I mean,
do you think Najee Harris? Do you think he'll be available at 24? Because there are reports about the Dolphins and possibly the Jets too, right before the Steelers pick.
Before you answer that, PFN, I was doing a mock draft. For some reason, it had Najee Harris going 15 to the Patriots, and at 24 was Farley from Virginia Tech. But I want to ask a question about is Harris going to go stupidly early?
Well, I think that the Patriots, they are a team that kind of scares me because they don't always follow what you think they will. And I think we think that they're probably a trade-up candidate to try and get in for one of the quarterbacks or take like Mac Jones. But I don't know what goes through Bill Belichick's head. So if he wants to make it easier on Cam Newton, I think Najee Harris as a running mate could make sense because he's had guys like Najee Harris before in there as a running back. So it's possible. I've definitely thought about him going to the Patriots. As for if he's there at 24, I believe he will be. I do. I think that the Dolphins, based on what I've seen, the buzz for them is going more and more towards edge rusher at 18. They think the value is going to be there. They'll probably take like Azeez Ojulari, Kwity Paye, someone like that. As for the Jets, I just think that they like Etienne more. He's a better fit for their wide zone scheme. Obviously, Saleh and McDaniel are there now. That's Kyle Shanahan guys, and they're going to want an explosive, quicker back in Etienne. So I think Etienne, it wouldn't actually surprise me if Etienne's the pick at 23 and he's gone, which would be interesting. But they could also probably circle back around in round 2 and get him.
And one thing with Etienne is that Steelers haven't had a breakaway running back since Willie Parker. Like that's the one thing I like about Etienne is that he has that breakaway speed. He get those chunk yards. He kind of people kind of compare him, I guess, to Kamara kind of because he kind of he catch out of the backfield and stuff and do those things. But what you mentioned about his pass blocking, that's a good point there because I haven't really seen him done that too well. He's kind of a smaller back, I guess you could say. But as far as Harris, I've seen some people concerned about his age. Are you concerned about that, or what have you been hearing from what others have been saying?
Yes, I'm concerned about that age.
Yeah, because he's going to be like 24 soon, or
he'll be 20. Well, he'll be 23 this whole season, but he'll turn 24 next year.
So he'll be 23 this whole season.
Yeah,
he'll be 29 at the end of his rookie contract if they give him the 5 year.
I believe he will be. He'll be. He was born on March 9th, so he just turned 23 a little bit over a month ago. Yes, though that does worry me because again, how this guy feels like when he gets that second contract after, and we're assuming this is after 5th year option, obviously. if the Steelers pick that up, he would be 29. And running backs historically just don't have a long shelf life. It's just something of a fact. You kind of look around the league. Second contracts with running backs historically just don't work out very well. It's not worked out well with, to this point, Christian McCaffrey. It hasn't really worked out with Mixon. It hasn't worked out with Zeke. Zeke's fallen off after what was a very dynamite first few years in Dallas. It's been very. Todd Gurley obviously never worked out for the Rams. There's a lot of guys that it just doesn't work out. Now, if you expect that short-term value to outweigh the long-term value, and what that means is if you expect Najee to be the piece to put Ben over the hill and get this team to a Super Bowl in 2021, difference, right? But long-term, the logistics and the analytics say Najee Harris is a one contract player, and how much value you get out of this pick is obviously how much you win with him and how big of a part he is of that. Now, you can obviously hope he is one of those outliers. There are a few outliers. Let's not completely ignore it.
Frank Gore.
Yeah, well, Frank Gore is a cyborg, right? Like this guy. Yeah, Frank Gore is different, but he's one of them. Frank Gore, Derrick Henry, to this point, Dalvin Cook is one of those guys as well. Listen, there are outliers to that. Najee could be 31 and be very good, but even Lev Bell has declined, right? So yeah, it concerns me. And the worst thing that could happen to the Steelers is Najee has a good first 2 or 3 years and then just falls apart in year 4. And then, they're getting a running back down. It's kind of what happened to Rashard Mendenhall. He was pretty good his first few years, and then he fell off the rails because that's what happens to running backs. Got some few injuries, tore his ACL. It's a physical position, and Najee has significant tread on his tires already as well. So it does worry me. But again, as I mentioned, I think he's the best pure talent at running back in the class. And a lot of people will disagree with me. I don't think it's close. I think he's in a tier of his own. So if they're going to take a running back in round 1, it's Najee, or it should be no one else. Like, they should trade out of 24 if they need. If they want ETN or Williams because they're younger, trade out. Just trade out.
Yeah, Williams, I think he's 20. I think he's
Williams is young.
Yeah, and trading back has been a big topic we've been reading.
You've been mentioning it a ton as well on Twitter.
Yeah, it could be an option for them to do if they feel like they could get more value and more picks to fill up some of their other needs. But if they were to draft Najee or another running back, would you like the move? Because I know it's a big topic on Twitter with legal analytics people. Warren Sharp's a big one. He's put a lot of stuff on Twitter how like it'll be a massive mistake if the Steelers would take a running back in the first round, because like he looks at it as like the Steelers believe that they're just a running back away from competing for the Super Bowl, and he doesn't believe that they're there right now.
I wouldn't be a huge fan of it. No. Again, I agree with him. I don't think they're running back away from the Super Bowl. Yeah. I think they need a corner. I think they need 2 linemen at least. I think they need significant depth across the board. I think they're a few pieces away. And I also think that Ben isn't what Ben used to be. And if you want to win the Super Bowl with this current version of Ben, which is still a decent quarterback, but it's not a guy who, elevates the team like he used to, you need to surround him with a really good team. So, yeah, I wouldn't be a huge fan of that, but I would significantly hate it more if it's a non-Najee running back.
Oh.
Significantly. Najee I'm okay with because I know he's going to be a really good player. Again, he's a top 20 player for me in this class. I love Najee Harris. I really do. He's a very good football player. ETN and Williams, they're good, but I see bust potential.
I feel ETN should have went out last year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think ETN, even in that class with Taylor, Akers, Dobbins, Swift, I think he would have been running back 1 significantly. So, yeah, I agree with that. I think ETN should have left last year. And ETN, there's just many. I can't draft a running back that has vision issues in the first round. I'm sorry. I just can't. Because unless they're switching to a pure wide zone scheme, which they could, but then why is Zach Banner starting? No. No,
you make him sound like he's going to be David Johnson II in Arizona. He could run zones all day, but anything inside the tackles, not enough vision.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what you could get with him. And it
I mean, he gives you one really good year if you want that, but when do you want that 1 year? If you want a rookie year, maybe not, but like year 2, Ben's probably going to be gone.
Yeah, exactly. And ETN reminds me of Tevin Coleman, and I don't think you're drafting Tevin Coleman in the first round. Like that's what he reminds me of. Maybe a little bit more explosive version of Tevin Coleman, a little less shifty. It doesn't make sense to me. The value is inherently bad already at running back, but Najee's a good football player, and I'd be okay if they went Najee and then lineman. Like that's my ideal scenario. Or they go, lineman corner. That's kind of what I'm thinking. So if they go, let's just say Najee, Dylan Radins, and then Josh Myers, or something like that, where they go, running back, tackle, center. I think that's 2 starters on the O-line and Najee. I'm okay with that. Najee's going to be a good player. Both of those players are very good linemen. They should start this year. I'll be okay with it. And I'm just not okay with the non-Najee running back. And not Najee himself has reservations for me. I would take players above him, but again, if they take anyone that's at running back, it's not Najee Harris. I think every member of Steelers Nation should not be happy with this pick. It's just because not only the thing is it's not just it's a running back, it's a reach. Like they're not first round talents, so that's what would upset me more. That would be a straight up reach in my opinion.
All right, so we've exhausted everything about running backs. We'll move on, but before we get to the trade back, trade up situations, you mentioned a little bit about other positions at 24, cornerback and linebacker. In my one mock draft that I pulled off, I seen that the Steelers took Farley from Virginia Tech at 24. Asante Samuel Jr. is another person they could take at corner, but I've been hearing so much about linebackers, so just explain, what would the Steelers be looking for if they went defense at either of those positions?
Yeah, so if they were looking at a linebacker, this is a guy that you would want to be a chess piece, a coverage chess piece, because now that you have Vince Williams back, you kind of have the buck, blitzer banging around at the line type of guy. So you would look for like a JOK, someone like that can fill multiple roles. A Zaven Collins who could fill multiple roles. I know there's Brian Broaddus said that a lot of people believe the Steelers are zeroed in on Zaven Collins at 24, which is interesting to me. He could play edge because he's like 270 pounds, like Le'Veon Kirkland almost with that frame. And certain Steelers fans will remember him from the 90s. So that's something they would look for. And JOK obviously can play safety, slot corner, kind of whatever. At corner, we aren't talking about how big of a need corner is. Like, there's 2 starters and then no one, in my opinion. Like, I like Pierre, but he played 20 snaps. It's not enough. It's a question mark. Justin Lane he got arrested, but he wasn't good anyways. And then they just have a bunch of dudes. Like, corner's a huge need, in my opinion. Probably a top 3 need, and I can make a good argument it's the biggest need on the roster, like legitimately. Huge need. So corner, you're just looking for any good outside or slot corner. So Caleb Farley would fit that, although the back injuries are obviously concerning. But if someone like a Greg Newsome is there, Asante Samuel Jr. is obviously the big one that's gotten a lot of tread. Kind of talking about him. He's a guy that can play inside or outside. Feisty in the run game. Can immediately replace Mike Hilton and be the starter. So you get a lot of bang for your buck there. That's kind of what you're looking for a corner. You just want a starter. But yeah, linebacker, if you're getting linebacker in round 1, you're looking at a specifically more narrow type of player, I think. You're not looking for that downhill guy. I think you're looking for a coverage guy to play beside Bush and sub packages.
And do you think they might go linebacker in the second round, maybe, possibly? Or when do you think they would go at that position?
I've heard from some people they want a linebacker in round 3. Which makes some sense to me.
And who do you think will be? I'm looking here right now, Davis from Kentucky, but it seems like he's rising up the boards right now, and he probably gone by then, definitely 3rd round.
Yeah, so some guys like in round
I want to
three.
see them try to pair Bush with another athletic linebacker. I mean, that's kind of hard to do to get two of them to find like a really good one. But who do you see in the third round that could be possibly picks?
Like Cameron Grown from Michigan. That's Devin Bush's replacement at Michigan, actually. So think of it as having two Bushes almost. But Grown very similar to Bush, aggressive, downhill, athletic, pretty, but he's a little bit more seasoned in coverage. Very young as well, coming into the league. Kind of fits what the Steelers look for. If McGrone was healthy and had played all year, I think he would be a French first round pick. But he came out a little early, so I think round 3 could be great value for him. Dylan Moses is another name. People haven't talked about Dylan Moses enough, in my opinion, connecting him to the Steelers. They were there at his pro day. And I think you look what Moses can bring. Obviously, before he kind of had an injury and kind of was a little bit slow to come out this season, he was a first-round pick. He's a guy I would just take a chance on. He's athletic. He's good in coverage. He's very mobile from side to side. I would take a chance on Dylan Moses. Pete Werner out of Ohio State's another guy that I would take a chance on. A guy that really, really did everything for that Ohio State team. And you talk about a coverage linebacker. This guy had reps at free safety. So this is a dude that can play all over the field, kind of the poor man's version of JOK almost, if you will. And he'll be there in that round 3 area. And Derek Barnes out of Purdue is another guy. I think that's rising up boards into that area. Very athletic, so explosive. I mean, ridiculously explosive for the linebacker position. And he's another coverage guy. So the good thing about this linebacker class for the Steelers is if they want one, it's a very deep class at linebacker. So they'll have options on day 2. And if they really want one, in that third round area, I think they can get a very talented guy that can steal snaps immediately from the guys next to Devin Bush.
The Ohio State has a couple inside linebacker. Was it Browning too?
Yeah, Baron Browning.
Yeah, he was talking with Tomlin. There was a picture of him at the Ohio State Pro Day. So that should be interesting. A cornerback. I've been reading a lot of mock drafts. If they go that route with like a running back, offensive lineman in the first 3 rounds, a lot of people have been pointing to like a slot cornerback in the round 4. Who do you like to replace Mike Gillen? Who do you see as a fit there in the 4th round?
Yeah, so corner is another, I think, relatively deep group that the Steelers can pick from. So I think Sean Wade is probably the most interesting guy there. They were at his pro day. Ohio State DB. Again, this is another guy, similar to Dylan Moses, thought it was a first-round pick before the season and fell down boards. And I think he's a guy that actually, because he played so much on the boundary, I think he's a guy that's going to work in and up, from safety to nickelback. Because I think when things are in front of him, he plays aggressive. He's explosive. He's got great twitch downfield. And I think he's a guy that can really actually work in that Mike Hilton blitzing role where he's just kind of playing with his hair on fire, blitzing, being physical. Maybe not being – because Hilton was never, I think, the greatest pure coverage corner. I don't think he ever was. That was kind of Cam Sutton's calling card. So Wade, I think, gives you safety depth on top of being the slot corner from day 1, and I think he would win that job because he was really good in the slot whenever he got the opportunity. So now other guys that could be in that area, DJ Daniel out of Georgia, I think is another guy that you could look around that area. Long guy, played a lot on the boundary. Actually, if he hadn't hurt his hamstring this year, which he did, and he missed a lot of time ceding it to Tyson Campbell and Eric Stokes, who are obviously the more hyped-up Georgia corners. DJ Daniel played against Jamar Chase in 2019 and gave him a lot of issues. And anytime you can give Jamar Chase issues, you have piqued my interest. So I really like kind of what we saw from DJ Daniel in that matchup. He's long, he's lengthy, he's fluid. I think he's a guy that you could look at and be a solid corner. Ambry Thomas out of Michigan is another guy. Robert Rochelle of Central Arkansas. There are options for the Steelers here, whether they want a boundary guy or a guy on the interior at slot. I think they have options for corner, luckily, late into this draft.
And, well, there's another position offensively that I want to take a look at beforehand because you basically covered all the linebacker corner sleepers. So tight end. right now the Steelers are rolling with Eric Ebron, and I imagine that after the draft they're going to probably sign a free agent tight end somewhere. There would be a nice idea to probably get the tight end of the future, a blocking combo player that can also catch out there, a la Heath Miller. Who are the tight end prospects?
Yeah, well, Frymuth is definitely that round 2 guy that they could target. Obviously, there's no one really in round 1 that they could take a chance on just outside of Pitts. There's just not value. But Frymuth is a guy that pretty smooth laterally. He's a decent route runner. He's a good blocker. So I think he's a guy that might not have an immediate impact outside of just that blocking tight end 2 role, but can have that year-to-year growth and be a legitimate starter. So that would be at 55. You mentioned Tommy Tremble. I think he's a guy that definitely has that ability. Matt Canada, you kind of have to understand how Matt Canada uses his tight ends, which is like a versatile super chess piece. They play fullback, they play H-back, they play traditional tight end in the inline. They will play outside as a receiver. They'll play, that slot role. So they got to do everything. If you're Matt Canada and you got to block, you got to be able to catch, you got to be mismatched. And I think Tremble has the athleticism. Again, wasn't used much in the receiving game, but he has the athleticism to grow as a receiver and is already a devastating blocker. So he can be that fullback, H-back, inline guy and still grow as a receiver. I really like what he brings to the table. Hunter Long out of Boston College is another guy I really like. I hope the Steelers like him too. He's kind of the same way as Tremble, a little less of a blocker, more dangerous as a receiver already. So you get more of the receiving aspect of that. And then there's obviously Trey McKitty out of Georgia. They've kind of liked him a lot, I think. He's a guy, very good blocker, went up to the ACC to prove his blocking skill. He really showed out there. And I thought he was a guy that has really solid ability to run his routes. I think he's got great mitts, and I think he's a guy that could grow maybe in that 4th round range, and he could grow potentially into a starter and be really nice value. Not a particularly deep class. I don't love the tight end class this year, but I do think there's possibility that where if the board falls right, that they can get a lot bang for their buck at the tight end position.
It's really a one tight end class when you think about it. It's Pitts that's kind of the guy that everyone's jockeying for a position out there, and that's the guy that everyone really wants right now. Aside, if they can't get a quarterback, they want Pitts or the Sewell, the left tackle out of Oregon.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Pitts is like a cyborg, and it's him and no one on this tight end group. This tight end group is painfully mediocre. So you look at it, and it's not going to be a great class. The Steelers have to get one in that round 2 range, I think. Round 2, 3, 4.
And because of the lack of depth or like the tight end class, like you mentioned, and the Steelers probably going, running back, offensive lineman, somewhere in that order. I told Ty before we got on here that I'm worried about, like, they're not going to address the tight end position to like fully this year, and that's one position I'm really worried about heading into this year because Ebron, he's a good pass catcher and everything, but like his blocking ability is just subpar, and I think they're going to struggle at that position until maybe next year in the draft when they get a top caliber player.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if they brought in like Jesse James as like a stopgap tight end too. I think it'd be a good move. That's I think what they got to do. They have to have a 2-pronged strategy here. Attack the draft with your needs, and then because they have so many needs, I think depth needs. That is, they have to get an outside linebacker. Like they have to get an outside linebacker. They have to get corner. Like these are positions they have to address, right? Like they have to address the O-line. They have to address running back. They have to address, corner, outside linebacker, and then you kind of don't have enough room for tight end. So it's like, well, if you want tight end, you are going to have to probably address that free agency and wait till next year, which it looks like early indications it's going to be a pretty good class. So maybe waiting till next year and just having this stopgap with Jesse James and using the remaining free agents to kind of fill out your holes is, I think, the best win now strategy.
There's one thing that I thought of with that. The Steelers didn't have like a tell when it came to bringing in a 6th offensive lineman. That could be one thing we're going to be seeing a lot. The tackle reporting eligible that isn't Zach Banner, and of course they're also going to have a second tight end. But My theory is this, that the Steelers have gone really wide receiver heavy because that's kind of been like their strength. And I feel like, yeah, there could be a possibility where they say we don't need a tight end. They could probably see if they could use Watt better also. And, the 6 offensive lineman strategy, that could help. It seems like they had that in mind with all the offensive line depth they acquired this offseason.
Yeah, I think that's something that they will explore. And Matt Canada's done that in the past at Pitt, at Wisconsin, at NC State. He's used 6 linemen, bigger linemen. And I think Joe Haig's probably the de facto 6th lineman this year, probably. But if they draft a tackle, maybe that becomes, a core 4 banner or whatever, or that rookie. So they definitely have options here at that spot. So I definitely think that they could use the 6th lineman, the jumbo package, if you will. And then, listen, they could use, if they really wanted to, they could use Juju and Claypool in some creative ways as blockers, because they're both very good blockers, and they could play them, maybe motion them inside and have them get some momentum before the snap, and then try and block some maybe smaller guys off the edge, create some matchups to where the slot corners the force defender off the edge, and maybe give their running back potential options there, because they just get better matchups in the run game. So, schematics and kind of personnel choices, if you don't have that second tight end, I think can help.
And with Kyle Pitts on your draft board, where do you rank him? Because a lot of people have been saying he's like the best player, like minus 0.25% of the quarterback prospects. They're really high on Pitts, like that I've seen in a long time as far as the tight end coming out.
Yeah, he's probably my second ranked player in this class. Yeah, it's probably Lawrence, him, that's Soul, I think. So
where do you think you'll see Pitts going? Do you think he'll go like top 5, or you think he might trade up and try to get him?
I think 4 to Atlanta. I think that's where he'll end up going. I think that makes a lot of sense, because he's the guy that's rising up, and it feels like Soul's the one kind of dipping a little bit, right? Like Soul might drop to like Carolina at 8 or something like that. While it feels like Pitts isn't getting past Miami at 6, or he's not going to get past Carolina at 8. It definitely feels like that Atlanta, when they were talked about with a lot of these QBs, when San Francisco jumped in front of them, they realized they probably weren't going to be able to get one of we're assuming the 49ers are smart and won't take Mac Jones, of course. They aren't going to be able to get maybe Trey Lance, because I think the 49ers are going to take Trey Lance. So that's kind of my feel. They're not going to be able to get him, and I think they really like Lance, and maybe they don't like Fields as much. So I think they're going to go with the win now strategy and just get Matt Ryan more weapons. Which, if you put Kyle Pitts, Julio Jones, and Calvin Ridley in the same offense, I don't know how you do those.
The trade down scenarios, and you mentioned that a little bit earlier, as in terms of if the Steelers decide not to draft running back and they don't want to go for Jenkins as the offensive tackle or Dickerson, they trade down. So who are the optimal people that could probably they used for that trade down scenario?
Teams that could trade down, man. That Chiefs trade with the Ravens kind of thrown that a little bit off the loop. I think the Chiefs were one of the teams that could trade up. Ravens, I don't think the Ravens and the Steelers will do business with each other, at least there. I can't see that happening. So that threw a wrench. But there are a few teams. I think the Buccaneers maybe could do it. They're kind of in like a win now scenario where they need to maximize the window they have with Tom Brady, who's probably not going to be there very much longer. And listen, they don't have many needs, but if they want to go up and get maybe a edge rusher to succeed JPP, I think that's a scenario the Steelers could really want. I think the ultimate scenario is obviously if Mac Jones falls right to 24. I think you can maybe get a ransom for him from someone. But I think they're interesting. I think the Falcons are interesting if they want to come back into the first round for an edge rusher, because they really need pass rush help. Outside of there's not a pass rusher there. I think they're interesting. There's just not a lot of many teams in the back half of round 1 that I could see doing it. The Bills maybe if they want to come up, but I feel like they're in a position to just stay. So I think if the Steelers want to do it, they're going to have to trade out of the first round. So all things precluded there. And there are teams at the top of the second. Again, the Falcons, I think the Panthers could do it. I think the Chargers, the Giants. It kind of depends on how far they're willing to move back. I think you should move back. I wouldn't move past 45, but if a team gave me if the Giants gave me maybe their second, their third, and maybe like a third next year, I think I would take that. If there's no one there, if your guy's there, especially if Najee's gone, I would. If Najee's gone and there's not a slam dunk tackle, I would get out of there. But yeah, that's kind of the part about trading down that's worrying me. I don't think there's a team where you look and say, yes, that makes sense.
I think it could be a realistic option. I know Pro Football Focus mentioned that Steve Palazzolo mentioned on 93.7 The Fan. So I mean, I don't know. I even wrote an article a couple of weeks ago about how it could be the best option for them. Just try to maybe you get Williams late early second round, and get maybe a third round pick or something, and maybe they could trade up and get one of those tight ends or something like a Hunter Long from Boston College or something like that, along with addressing like center or offensive tackle too. I think they just need to get more picks to add to the holes, so many holes they have on their roster.
I think so too, and I think that's something that you look at, because if they get another day 2 pick, they just get another day 2 pick, it opens up the draft playbook at that point, because you can draft you can address corner with significant capital now, or you can address tight end, or you can address if you get tackle and center and running back taken care of. You can dress like one of those hybrid, safety guys where you're just doing a lot of DB stuff. But I was talking about this with Alan Saunders of Pittsburgh Sports Now. They could have. This is one that could come up in a trade back center. They could draft a receiver. Like that early. There are guys that are in that area: Amari Rodgers, Dwayne Eskridge. Just thinking of kind of guys there. They could draft a receiver earlier than you would think, because again, that's a significant future need, not a need this year. But Juju's a free agent. Washington's a free agent next year. And all they'll have is Deontay. Also, Ray McLeod's a free agent. So you're just going to have Deontay Johnson, Trace Claypool. They could draft a receiver. That's not completely out of the question. But it basically, the whole point of it is obviously it opens up the playbook for you to. You could draft outside linebacker, you draft a linebacker, you could draft whatever the heck you want. And that's kind of what the whole point of it would be.
If I would have to put my general manager hat on, if Najee or Jenkins weren't there at 24 overall, that's what I would probably do. I would probably trade back and just get more draft capital probably.
Yeah, exactly, right?
But we'll have to see what Culver has in mind. This coming week, just a couple days away now.
Now let's talk about the interesting scenario that's brought up, and I want to basically highlight with this the one mock draft that I did, where for some reason I chose the Eagles. One of the trade up scenarios for them was the Steelers going from 24 to 12. It's totally pie in the sky, because for some reason that mock draft, Kyle Pitts was available at 12. I don't think that would be necessarily the Steelers' target, because in reality, 12, he's probably long gone. But say if the Steelers really got enamored with a quarterback, say Justin Fields, from how they felt during that pro day, where are the trade-up scenarios for the Steelers that make sense?
Well, yeah, Fields is obviously the biggest one. I think that makes sense. I don't think he's going to fall very far. I think there's too many suitors. The Patriots, the Washington football team, the Bears, those all are teams that picked before them that probably have more to offer than they do. But if Fields is not thought of super highly and the Steelers love him, yeah, they could trade up with the Eagles. They could trade up with pretty much any team there. The Chargers, the Vikings, the Giants, Cowboys.
Here's the funny thing from that mock draft. It had the Giants drafting Mac Jones at 11. That's not happening. That's where I go, Mac's not going there. So that's why I wanted to make sure I put this as a hypothetical, just based off the one mock draft that I pulled off.
Yeah, exactly. That's not happening. Daniel Jones is the guy for sure. I have no doubt about it. But yeah, like Fields would probably be the most realistic trade up. If they trade up, like the most likely trade up would probably be like 3-4 spots to get someone that they really like I don't know, a Surtain or a JC Horn falls or something like that. A Darisaw falls. If Christian Darisaw like falls to like 20 and they want to hop in front of the Colts to get him, that's a scenario where they maybe can move up, give up one of the fourths, which would sting. But like that's a scenario. I can't. It's with how many knees they have. I can't see them trading up out. It's really tough unless there's a dude that they can't miss that's falling. I just can't see them trade up. Like I don't know what else they would trade up for. Maybe Darisaw, maybe Horn or Surtain. Fields is the most likely, but outside of that, and we're just talking realistic, like there's no way maybe if Slater falls a little bit down the board, but that's probably not happening either. But like it's tough to envision them trading up. They just don't have the luxury of doing it, I think.
Yeah, I think the trade up scenarios are more going to be a next year thing with all those comp picks. And are those, and just to clarify, are those available to be traded right now for this draft, or is that still like a weird rule with the NFL?
Yeah, I don't think they are available to trade for this draft, so I don't think they can trade them just yet. I think they have to become official picks and be awarded before they can do it. So yeah, that's a next year thing where they need a quarterback probably because Ben's gone or something like that. That's when they would trade up. But and again, the most realistic trade up scenario I personally think is a Justin Fields fall, and then they go up and get him. But even that feels like a pretty far out there theory. So yeah, it's a next year thing.
Yeah, and speaking of the quarterback position, for some reason, like everybody on ESPN thinks the Steelers should take a second tier quarterback, like in the second or third round, which I'm not really high on any of the guys in the later rounds for the quarterback. I think they have to address that in 2022. What do you know about the 22 quarterback draft class? It could be really unpredictable because like who knew about Wilson from BYU last year? He just kind of came on the radar this year. I remember looking at mock drafts like early last year. They had like Jamie Newman going to the Steelers like in the first round. So it's still kind of unknown right now. But what do you know of the 2022 quarterback draft class?
From the little I've watched, I'm not a huge fan of it. There's obviously no Trevor Lawrence. There's not even a Justin Fields or a Trey Lance or a Zach Wilson. Now there are candidates. There's Spencer Rattler, who's got like great tools, but he's not put together. There's Sam Howell. Sam Howell's interesting because he's like Baker Mayfield, like literally. He reminds me a lot of Baker Mayfield. So I kind of I'm just saying you would pretty much be watching Baker Mayfield versus Baker Mayfield became a Steelers quarterback and it was Browns Steelers. Like I don't know how. Would you guys want to watch two Baker Mayfields?
I don't know. That'll be
if our Baker Mayfield does better than their Baker Mayfield, yeah, why not? There's also I don't know if De'Aaron King from Miami is going to be doing anything. That's one guy that I know off the top of my head right now that may declare. But I mean, there's really no one. I mean, we could literally spitball anyone for 2022. It could be Kenny Pickett. Who knows at this point?
Hail to Pitt, right? Yeah, I mean it could be Kenny Pickett. I don't know. There's guys there, like deep sleepers that I can name, like Caleb Ellaby out of Western Michigan is interesting because he's a MAC quarterback and he's also really like toolsy. The guy that like when I was watching Ellaby, and he's super intriguing to me because he's got like this rocket arm. He's like left-handed Kyler Murray, and it's like super fun. He's just got to put it together, though. But I think he could be like the riser. But there's still a few guys. I mean, Keaton Slovis out of USC is really interesting. He kind of fits what the Steelers look for. He's like he's very mobile, and he's got this really good arm. And I think that's kind of what Matt Canada is going to look for, a more mobile quarterback. There's just a lot of what ifs next year. Jaden Daniels, I mean, I could name so many quarterbacks, and none of them are certain right now. So who knows?
And Ty mentioned Kenny Pickett. I want to know what about the Pitt football players that are going into the draft this year? Where can you see them going?
Yeah, tell me about Paris Ford, man. I'm a Steel Valley graduate, and I teach up there. I got to know what's going on with Paris, man.
Yeah, obviously Ford, he didn't test very well at the Pitt Pro Day, and that's kind of tanked his stock to a degree. Unfortunately, I think he's a good ball player. Around 5 to 7 is unfortunately where he's going to go. Now, I think he could stick, and I think he could really carve out a nice career. So I think that's where he'll go with Paris Ford. DeMar Hamlin's probably going to go before him. Another Pittsburgh guy, like local guy, Central Catholic. I think that DeMar could sneak into day 2, I think, but he'll probably go 4 or 5. I think the first Pitt guy off the board would probably be either Rashad Weaver or Patrick Jones, the edge rushers. Those guys can go round 3. One of them could slip into round 2. So that's where they can kind of go. I think there's a good chance that Morrissey and Pinnock can slip into the back end of day 3 for sure. I think Morrissey's going to get drafted around 6 or 7. Pinnock in the same range, and I think Bryce Hargrove could also sift himself in there as well. So Pitt could have the potential to have 6 or 7 guys drafted. It wouldn't surprise me.
Who's the defensive lineman too that he had a bunch of bench presses?
Twyman. Yeah, Twyman could definitely be drafted too. Probably in that round 4 to 6 range. I would look at Twyman. Yeah, I forgot about Twyman. He'll get drafted as well.
And also, I just wanted to talk about this. We're talking about with Pitt before we go. I did manage to catch a little bit of your coverage of the Pitt spring game yesterday. It was a nice job.
Thanks, man. Thanks. Yeah, called that one. That was fun. Just the spring game, laid back, chill. Pitt football this year, 2021. I think they have a really good chance to be pretty solid.
And that's Nick Farabaugh, Steelers and Pitt football writer for Pittsburgh Sports Now. You can follow him on Twitter at FarabaughFB. Nick, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
And that was Nick Farabaugh. We thank him again for coming on. And Chris, we're a few days away from the draft. Not much Steelers news going on, but there was big news last week. Mike Tomlin signs a 3-year extension with the Steelers. There were some people that were saying well-deserved, and there was some people that went, I don't know about that one, Chief.
Steelers fans are always like 50-50 on him. He kind of is polarizing sometimes among the fan base, but I'm a Tomlin fan. I had no problem with the extension. He's one of the best coaches in the league. He's never had a losing season in his 14 years with the Steelers. He does need to get the playoff issues figured out. He's 3-6 since the 2011 season in the playoffs. So he needs to get that big 8-8 overall. But I mean, he's one of the most consistent coaches in the league, and minus Bill Belichick and Andy Reid. I mean, Sean Payton, Pete Carroll, and John Harbaugh have the same issues with the playoffs too. And they all have or had, in the case of the New Orleans, a franchise quarterback. So it's not only Tomlin. It's not easy to win the NFL, especially in the playoffs.
I want to give Tomlin a shot to potentially find the future franchise quarterback of the Steelers, the next quarterback after Ben Roethlisberger. That was always my big thing when it came to Mike Tomlin. It's like there was one constant that he had his entire tenure with the Steelers was Ben Roethlisberger. And then we got to see a little bit of what life would be like without Ben Roethlisberger, and it still was a non-losing season. It was 8-8. So it's clear the guy can make the best out of bad situations. There's a reason that even with Ben Roethlisberger, this team has never finished below 500, and that has to count for something, especially with the future of a rebuild in Pittsburgh looking for that future franchise quarterback. That's what I want to see out of Tomlin in the future. You've had the guy since the beginning. Can you mold the guy? That's the question.
Yeah, and that's how I looked at his last extension was in July of 2019, and then like you mentioned, he had that 8-8 season when Roethlisberger only played all but 6 quarters until he had a season-ending elbow injury, and he had to deal with Mason Rudolph and Devlin Duck Hodges at quarterback. So I mean, he still led him to 8-8. They barely missed the playoffs really, and then the next season they start off the season with the franchise best start record-wise with 11-0. And then, they collapsed down the stretch and everything, and it wasn't a good ending to the season. But, it wasn't all on Tomlin. They had no running game. Their offensive line got old quick. They have to rebuild that. Randy Fichtner wasn't the best offensive coordinator, and, Ben didn't play good down the stretch either. So, that's not all on Tomlin. So I can see why Art Rooney, too, gave Tomlin the 3-year extension because, you're going in a transition with moving on from Ben eventually, and Tomlin's the best guy to lead them into that new direction. People say, who would you hire if they got rid of Tomlin? Who can be better really as of right now? I'm sure you could find a guy maybe. There's always potential, coaches out there. But, Tomlin would get a new job within 10 seconds if the Steelers would ever let him go.
Is there anything you're looking forward to in this draft?
I'm looking to see what happens with the running backs, and that's obviously a huge discussion among Steelers fans. Also the offensive lineman that will come off the board. I think that's really where they want to go. But like I mentioned during the podcast, I think trading back could be a realistic scenario there if Najee Harris or Tevin Jenkins are not on the board. I think they might try to get more draft capital and trade back into the but still in the first round or early second round.
It would be interesting to see the history of the Steelers in terms of trading out of the first round. A quick internet search for me has yielded no dice. There's been a lot of situations where they came into the draft not having a first round pick. Last year was one of them. So they hit more often than not in the first round. And I will always trust the Steelers' judgment when it comes to draft picks because there's been a lot of success. And
yeah, last time they traded in the first round, they're still in the first round, but they traded back 3 spots with Casey Hampton for Casey Hampton in 2001, so 20 years ago.
So there's a lot of interesting things we will be doing on draft night. We will be going live with direct reaction after the Steelers' first round draft pick. It'll be me and Guthrie, and Chris will join in later after he writes the article for our first round draft pick, whoever it may be. But above all, people should really enjoy this time. It's interesting to see what the Steelers will do to either extend their window or perhaps look into the future with this first round pick. And of course, also the second and third and the rest of the day 3 picks. So just sit back, enjoy it. Roger Goodell's back to be booed and hug the players.
Yeah,
there's not going to be, yeah.
Did you see that tweet about Adam Schefter? That was very funny.
What a crazy world we live in these days. So until then, for Chris Ward, I'm Ty Polk. Thank you for tuning in to the Renegade Blitz. Thank you for listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, read articles on renegadeblitz.com, and like us on Facebook. Our podcast is available on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, YouTube, iHeart, and Spotify.